Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have so much fun today because we're going to be talking about what happens if you are looking for a job, how to find your passion in your job. If you're in a job and you're going, that's not good, right? And so we're going to have so much fun talking with my guest today. So please join me in welcoming Kristen Zavo to our program today. Welcome, Kristen. How are you doing today?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Great. Well, let me tell people just a little bit about you and then we'll dive into this. So Kristen Zavo is a career coach, keynote speaker, and author of the international bestseller, Job Joy, Your Guide to Success, Meaning, and Happiness in Your Career. In her coaching practice, she works to help high-achieving professionals land jobs, launch businesses, and build careers that they love. So again, Kristen, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love it. Well, I always like to ask my guests how they got to where they are today. So tell us a little bit about how you discovered that this is your passion in life, at least for now.
Yeah, at least for now, right? We reserve the right to change our minds.
Right.
I love it. Yeah, I got to this place, like many of us, later in our career through my own experiences. I have, before I launched my coaching practice, I had 15 plus years in traditional corporate roles. I did investment banking. I did some teaching. I did consulting, marketing, and strategy for Fortune 500 companies. And so I've had multiple careers, multiple jobs. And, every time I went to change jobs, I was sure I knew why, right? It was, this isn't the job for me, or I should be promoted, or maybe, this particular thing will make me happy, or maybe it was just a bad project. And what I realized, and this took me a while to realize, and I like to shortcut this for my clients, is the common denominator was me, right? And while all of that might have been true, right? The things that were frustrating or upsetting, the fact of the matter is that, I was choosing jobs for the wrong reasons. I wasn't choosing, roles that were really aligned with who I was, with the life I wanted to live. Right. I was more focused on, the external factors were all, taught, right? Money, title, prestige. And so that got me to a place where, I was able to play the game really well, right? And I suspect a lot of your listeners too, right? They're good girls. They know how to check the boxes. They know to play the game. But I found myself in a very successful role, right? And my life from the outside looked great. I was living in New York City in a high-rise apartment. I was doing fancy things, talking to boards and reporting to CEOs as a young person. But the reality is that I was the most unhappy I had ever been. And, I looked around and it's like, I've done all the things. This is what I thought I wanted. Why am I so unhappy?
Right.
And so it was that path, which led me to change careers, to change jobs, and, ultimately to uncover the reasons I was unhappy. And then people started asking me, wait, how'd you do that? Can you help me?
Right.
And before I knew it, what I thought was a corporate career change really ended up being the start of my coaching career.
Right. Yeah, I remember years ago when I started my company, I was the same thing, a lot of those. And this one very wise person said, you do an awful lot of things for free and for fun. Is there a reason you don't want to get paid for them?
Oh, yes.
And same thing. People would say, hey, can you help me with this? Can you, and it was doing things like newsletters and marketing things for them. Sure. I was the perpetual volunteer. And really that's what it came down to was it was something I loved. So why not get paid for it?
Yeah. And it's such a good example because, when I was in consulting, I would for fun write for career blogs, when
Mhm.
blogs were like a new
Right.
thing,
Uh,
right? And I would do it for fun. And there was no monetary thing.
right.
It was just because I wanted an outlet. I wanted to share. I wanted to help other
Mhm.
women professionals. And so looking back, I can see that as kind of like, duh, of course I ended up here, right? But at the time, I was just doing what I loved. And so I think the point you bring up about why not do what you love, why not get
Mhm.
paid for it, but also to look at the things that you're happy to do for
Right.
free as perhaps evidence of what could be the next step,
Mhm.
especially if you're feeling stuck and lacking clarity.
Right. Right. So when you work with people, clearly they've come to you because they are thinking, we need to at least think about a change. But what are really those signs? Because we're not going to like everything 100% of the time. We don't bound out of bed every morning going, I gotta go do it, whatever it is.
Oh,
Um,
wait, you don't do that?
and of course I would bound out of bed and fall flat. That would be me. But yeah, it's one of those things where we hope we're happy, we hope we're fulfilling things, and but in many cases we're just kind of the drones, right? We've all been there, but it ends up being a mix, right? They're the, oh god, years ago, and I talk about this every once in a while on the program, the commercial for, I think it was Dunkin' Donuts. Little dude
Yeah.
gets out of bed every morning at 2, gotta make the donuts.
Time to make the donuts. Yes.
And he'd schlep himself off, and then it's
Yep.
like the next day, gotta make the donuts. I have days like that, and sometimes we might have weeks and months too. But how what are things that are really key indicators to you that when someone says, Kristen, this just, what are the things that are like, okay, you need to give serious consideration to changing?
Yeah. Well, there's so many things. When we start to lose ourselves, we don't recognize ourselves
Okay.
anymore, right? It's many times with career, I work with such high achieving professionals. It's like they become their job.
Right.
They are their job. Everything is centered around that
Yeah, that's their
at the
identity.
expense. Yeah, yeah. And that's what we're taught. And that is the culture we're in, right? And that's what we're taught growing up. And that's
Right.
certainly corporate culture, right?
Mhm.
But we're so much more than our jobs,
Mhm.
right? And so when we lose ourselves, when we don't recognize ourselves, when we are really irritable, and by the time we get home there's like nothing left because we've had
Mhm.
to have this face on, right? Which is a lot of work. It's a lot of energy and to put on a good face when you're
Mhm.
miserable, right? Or you're tolerating. So I
Mhm.
would say, number one, when you don't recognize yourself, your health is suffering, your
Mhm.
relationships are suffering, your emotional well-being is suffering. You're someone who normally feels really confident, and all of a sudden you're questioning everything,
Mhm.
right? That's another piece that can show up. Um, and when you find yourself, continually putting off, oh, when this thing happens or when this thing happens, I'll be happy, right? And I'm totally guilty of that. I would have told you in my 20s, I'm working hard in my 20s, and basically this is my partner in my 20s, and I was
Mhm.
happy to dedicate that, but I didn't realize how unhealthy
Mhm.
that was, right? And if I could go back to my younger self, I would tell
Mhm.
her, no, you'll actually be better at work if you
You
have
don't
more of
need
a
that
life.
title.
Don't be married to the job, right? And spoiler alert, you're going to leave this industry anyway, right?
Right.
If only we could go back to our younger selves,
I know, but then it wouldn't be fun, right?
right? Right. That's the journey of life. We don't know what's next.
Mhm.
Um, but I think, also when people are just really unfulfilled, and what's the point?
Mhm.
And I want to make an impact, and I do want to be happy every day. And I know we had a previous discussion where I said I'm happy, I would say, in my work 85% of the time.
Right. Mhm.
And it's not that I'm unhappy the other part, maybe that's
Mhm.
the 15% when there are
Mhm.
things I have to do, or
Right.
challenges that come up.
Mhm.
But I do want people to be happy at, at
Mhm.
least 70% of their jobs, right?
Mhm.
And when we're doing work that we're really aligned with and that really matters, and we're taking care of ourselves
Mhm.
and have a life outside of work, we're actually able to hold a lot more,
Right.
right? To have that perspective. I remember years ago, I read this blog post by Mark Manson, and he talked about your shit sandwich. Have you heard of this?
No.
And he was saying, no matter, even if you are in the perfect job, you have the perfect business, right? We all have a shit sandwich we need to eat. Maybe it's the admin email stuff we need
I
to
don't
do.
like invoicing, but I got
Right, the invoicing, the, whatever it is. But if you love your work and you are aligned with it, it's a lot easier to happily eat that sandwich, right? Versus it being one more thing you have to do. And it's so true. I mean, even tasks that I don't like to do, I will make them sacred. I will put love into them. I will put intention into them. And I'm really grateful that I'm, in a position in my life where I can do that. I'm not sure that would have been back when I was in corporate. If I told them I was putting love into the marketing, they probably would have looked at me like I was crazy. But I totally do it as a business owner.
Right. Well, and it is that perspective of, I get to do this as opposed to I have to do this. Even on the things that you have to do, like I said, invoicing is not my favorite thing in the world, but hello, if I don't do it, then I don't get
money is a good thing though.
Right. And so, the way to think about it is, because I get to work with great people, they get to pay me. And so, think of those things. And even if it's just, I'm taking home a paycheck. And so then I'm able to care for my family.
Yeah.
That insurance, all of those things, because we're not just talking about business owners, we're talking about employees too, and how can they put that's, I hate to use the word spin because that tends to be kind of a negative thing, but how do they think about it in ways where it's like, okay, I get to do this.
Yeah. But what you said, right? Whether you call it spin, whether you call it perspective, your perspective, the way you choose to see things, which is absolutely in your control, right? We can make that shift in any moment. Our perspective absolutely influences our experience of whatever's going on. We can have the exact same experience, but if we're in the mode of, hey, how exciting, look what I get to do versus, oh my goodness, I hate that I have to do this. It's a completely different shift, even if the reality is the same.
Right. Right. Yeah. And a big part of it, especially when you're in a company, is the culture. Is there a culture there? And it's interesting. I've had several guests on recently where we were really been talking about the culture and how the leader at the top is who sets that culture. Is he very family oriented? So therefore that's going to come down that, everybody gets to spend time with their family. Their families are priority, all of those various things. And it is very interesting when you work in a company, what their culture is. We've all seen, the movies that are, and typically it's, I think, financial companies and attorneys, right? Where they're working 29 hours a day,
right?
These palatial houses, which I've never figured out, how it is that they even know that they're there. But but they're working and working and working and or as we call it, working for the man. But if they've got that culture, and some people thrive on that, right? They think that's great, but that culture is what really sets the tone for how the employees are gonna like stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And, whether you're a business owner or you're working corporate, or maybe you're kind of straddling both. I see a lot of my entrepreneur clients, they do have either a part-time or full-time corporate job to really fund their mission, to fund their impact. Culture is so important, right? And it takes time to think about, who am I? What do I want? How do I want this, corporate job to fit into my life? And some people just want to go to work, do their thing and leave, right? And other people... Yeah. And so you want to look for a company that will allow you to do that. Whereas other people, they do want to feel more of, I hate to say it, I cringe when people say we're like a family, but like they do want to feel more of a community at work, right? And many people, that is, a main social aspect for them, right? So yeah, culture fit is huge.
Yeah. Years ago, I worked for an agency and it was, typical agency. You never knew from 10 minutes to the next what was going to happen. Because we're putting out fires, all these various things.
Sounds like consulting.
The greatest thing in the world, right? Because I thrived on that, on the energy and all of that. And this woman worked for us and that was not her thing. She wanted to know what was on her schedule at 3/9 every afternoon. I mean, all of these things. And so she didn't last long with us, but that was just her. I mean, for her to be happy, she needed to know what was going to happen. And constant upheaval just, and so she ended up going to work for a very large corporation that had the rules, and she knew at 3:09 p.m. what she was doing every day. And I think that's one of the things that people, when they're looking for jobs, they need to look at that. Am I going to get that out of where I'm applying to work?
Yeah. And you have to be honest with yourself. Sometimes that's the hardest thing, right? Like we think it says something about us if we can survive and thrive and it's really intense, and we almost put it on as a badge of honor. But, number one, saying, is that who I am? Is it who I am now? Right? Because what excited me in my 20s and what I was willing to do in my 20s is very different than now. I'm no longer willing to work an 80-hour week. And I don't need to, right? But there was a time when I did do that, right? But being honest with yourself, that can be the hardest thing, right? And it can be so hard to say, this thing that I've been going after, this career that I've been investing in, it might not be the fit for me, whether it's a culture just at one company, whether it's the industry as a whole, right? That can be a really scary thing to do. And yet, no matter how old you are, whether, you're 30, you're 40, you're 50, we spend way too many hours at work to stay stuck in something we know is not a fit simply because we don't want to make our past selves wrong, or simply because we're afraid of what is this going to mean? Everything's going to change, right? It's better to go through the discomfort of saying, what do I want? What is success to me now? And going after it, versus the discomfort for decades, depending on where you are in your career, of tolerating a situation that is not a fit.
Right. And expectations of everybody else is, those are so good and bad. I talk with a lot of people that they're like, well, but I spent all this time and money getting this degree.
Yes.
And, or I'm supposed to take over the family business, or it was always expected that I would be the first one to graduate from college in my family. And they're like, I just want to be an auto mechanic. That's, and so that's where it gets hard too. So how do, when you talk with people and they're like, but everybody expects me to do X, what do you tell them?
Well, this is a topic that comes up with all my clients, whether they're corporate, whether they're entrepreneurs. I literally, like in my programs, I have a training called Other People's Expectations.
I love it.
How to handle it, right? And I think, some of it is really coming to terms with the fact is, and this takes maturity, this takes courage to realize you have one life.
Right.
And, some people, they're, as terrible as it sounds, they're waiting for, someone to die before they can go after their dreams. Like, oh my God, no, we have one life, and it's our responsibility. And on sometimes it seems like it's so long, but the truth is it's going to happen like this. And really, even just a simple exercise, thinking of older you, thinking of you plus 20 or 30 years. And what advice would she give you? What would make her proud? Right? At the end of your days, are you going to be happy? And we know the answer to this, right? But are you going to be happy that you lived your life in order to not rock the boat, or in order to keep someone else comfortable? Right. And it's a really sobering thought when we think about ourselves on our deathbed. But, and I'm thinking of that Steve Jobs commencement speech from forever ago that's become a classic. Right. And he says, the fear of death is actually one of the biggest gifts, because it shows us we have nothing to lose. Right. And it's one of the things. So, there's a maturity, there's a confidence coming here. There's a, not going from 0 to 100 little by little, right? Really unpeeling the onion, and before we even make any moves, figuring out, who am I actually, and what do I actually want? And we can take baby steps there. We don't need to go.
We're not saying go into your job and quit tomorrow.
No. Although if you want to, I'll help you with that. But no, we're not. Right. And is it going to be uncomfortable, right? As we're changing, because then our relationships are going to change. Absolutely. But it is so worth it. And you have to ask yourself, would I rather pretend to be someone else in order to keep love right? Or acceptance or validation that is based on not even who I truly am, right? Or do I want to take the risk to go after what I want, and trust that the people who matter, they're going to come along with me.
Right. And if they don't, well, then that's a different situation.
And you are protecting a fake relationship.
You look at, especially the people who make so much money, and one of the biggest things that we all keep hearing about is Tom Brady and Giselle, and I can never say her last name. Who
we all know who she is.
Gorgeous woman, right? Yes. Who had 700 and some million dollars, the perfect children, the perfect life, and all of these things. And and they both had these very different expectations of what was going forward. Now, you can't tell me that they didn't know. It wasn't that they both woke up one day and went, but it was, the expectations that they had put on each other and on themselves. I mean, that was the thing when Tom Brady quit. He was like, that wasn't really what I wanted to do. He quit for the wrong reasons. But then, when they were talking about the divorce, when she just said, all I wanted was him home. You really do have to think. Now, granted, they had all that money, but then when things changed, it wasn't going to work out. And we see that whether it's somebody that, is making millions of dollars or, whatever. Yeah, when they change, it was like, wait a minute, you're and of course we see that frequently when people retire. It's like, now who are you? What are you doing in my kitchen?
Right? Yeah, it's so true. And the fact is, and I of course don't know the intimate details of their relationship, but I would assume that they had best of intentions from the beginning. I would assume he believed that he wanted to retire. I bet you there's a lot of, obviously his identity is wrapped up in that, who is he without football, right? Doesn't take a psychologist to know that.
We lose who we are.
Yes, we lose who we are. And that's such a big part of his identity, right? At some point, he's going to have to retire. And at some point, he's going to have to figure out, who am I without football? Right. And maybe not. Maybe he'll go on to host the TV shows until the day he dies. He'll be like Troy Aikman, right? I think he's still.
Right. Yeah.
He was who I followed as a kid. Number 8, Dallas Cowboys. That's where my football history ends. But
right.
Yeah. And same thing for her. And they're allowed to change their minds, and it doesn't, and I'm more talking general now, right? If you do change your mind, we're all allowed to do that. And if that changes some relationships, that's okay, but it's realigning to what is actually in the best interest of everyone. No one wants to be with a martyr who's living their life or not going after their dreams in order to stay in the relationship. That doesn't feel good on either side, even if you think that's what you want, right?
Yeah. And we're certainly not saying be selfish, and only be thinking of yourself, because especially if you are married and have kids and all of these, it could be that you have to have that 9-to-5 job in order to do the other things that you want to do. But it's all about, figuring those things out and knowing, okay, I'm doing this so that I can do that, and making that choice, that is, you've said that before, making those decisions and those choices as opposed to being forced into it.
Yeah. And then it changes from, for example, if you're doing a job that's not your dream job, that job is, instead of being a sacrifice, right, it is actually in devotion to the bigger dream. And that's another kind of mindset shift, that we talk about. Also, to your point about, needing to compromise, I really do believe if we can all be open in relationship, that there is a possibility of win-win for everyone.
Right.
And when we do choose what's right for us, I do believe it has, and when I say right, I don't mean what ego wants.
Right.
I mean what is aligned with our strengths, with our passions, with our soul's desire for our experience on earth. When we choose that, I really believe it benefits everybody.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because part of it is, especially if you have kids, what example are you setting for them?
Yes.
And are you the person that, works every day, 10-hour days, comes home, is so tired you can't function. And I had a guest, we were talking about this, where he said, he his dad was very, very busy. He was, an athletic director and a coach and all of these things.
Mhm.
And so even when he was able to spend time with his son, he wasn't spending time with his son because he was so committed to that career. And he said it wasn't until, long after his dad had retired that he realized how much he had screwed up. He said, because I missed all of those things, but he was still doing his passion. So, I mean, that's the tricky part in all of this.
Yeah, well, it's priorities, right? And we're whole human beings. Our work is just one piece of our impact. It's just
Right.
one piece of our life. And we get to see, not just what is my passion in general, but what are my priorities in this season of life. And again, really being open to the possibility, like I really do believe we can have it all.
Mhm.
I know people say you can't have it all if you
Right.
have a good family life. I really believe we can have
Mhm.
it all. It requires us to be open. It requires us to be open to different possibilities, maybe things looking a little different, but we can absolutely be passionate about our work and also have plenty of time for family. Like
Right.
I've helped my clients get there. So it's absolutely, it's just, we have this, like, it's drilled into us that we have to choose, right? And especially
Right.
as
We
women,
don't.
right?
Right.
Yeah. As women, we have to choose career or family, right? And we don't. We get to have it all. And it might look a little different, but what I love about the way the workforce is changing is that things are starting to look different, and everything is not just this typical put on a suit and go to work from 9 to 5 like it was, a couple decades ago.
Right. So let's talk more about that because the workforce has changed. In the last 2.5 years, we have seen some very drastic changes, and not only here in the United States, but around the world. But here in the States, I think we're probably kind of leading this whole remote work thing. And it was really interesting, when this first happened, and they said, "Oh, we'll be back to normal before too long." And we
A
all went,
couple months.
and we all went, yeah, right. No. And, and so some people were, people, companies, all that, we're a little slow to adapt because we're thinking, okay, well, if we're going to have a remote workforce, that's going to be a lot of equipment that they have to have. I was talking to one person who 4 months into the pandemic still did not have a chair for her desk. Now, part of that was the whole supply chain issue, right? People were making desks out of, doors and all sorts of things. But, and once they figured out this is working, I think that was a huge shift. And so I think that's, yeah. And like you said, especially for women, because we can be home, we can be with the kids, we can be doing all of these things and still be whatever role that we're wanting at work.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has
So
to.
it has to, and it should. And I think that was the direction we were headed anyway.
Mhm.
And the pandemic
More and more people who would say, I'm not
yeah.
working on Friday. They negotiate that in there, all those things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So the pandemic definitely supercharged the path that we were already on. I mean, so many companies saw that people could be just as, if not more productive at home. And that's not for everybody, but for someone who, and when they show the studies, right? Obviously, if you were taking care of kids and you were homeschooling in addition to your job, like a lot of women were doing, plus holding the emotional space, right? I mean, as women, we do so much. But if someone is able to focus on their job, they actually get so much more done in such less time because you're not being interrupted all the time. So we saw, and this is for your typical remote jobs, right? Or your typical corporate jobs. I'm not talking about someone who's working in a hospital or, that sort of thing. For sure. But, we saw that so many of us could work remote. And now, right, we're seeing the tide kind of turn. And there's this resistance between employees who are like, hey, if I could do my job at home, why do I have to come back in? And then you have these executives, right, who want people in the office 100% of the time. And it's this old school mentality. If I don't see you, you're probably not working, right? Assuming that
the last 2.5 years. And so
right.
I like that. I'm like, so has it not been working? Well, no. It's been working.
Yeah.
So it's going to stop working?
Yeah, well, it's a control thing. It's an old school thing. And I'm not sure how much I buy into this, but there's some truth to this. I could tell you as a former consultant, I saw this little video, and it's like the men at the top who want everyone to come back into the office is because they don't want to be at home.
Right. Yeah.
Right? right? And I can tell you in consulting, so many of the men who lasted a really long time, they like to be on the road because they wanted the wife and the kids and all the good stuff on the weekend, but they didn't want to deal with the messy day to day, right? And I'm not saying that's a big thing, but I think we have kind of that old school structure in place. And so there's a lot of tension, and the solution is supposed to be this hybrid thing, which, on some accounts seems to be working well, but I've also seen other accounts that hybrid is actually more confusing than just remote.
What you need is somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. And then, the frustration of people like, getting ready in the morning, commuting, they come into the office and then they're on Zoom calls all day. And it's like, I could have done this at home. And by the way,
got shoes on.
Exactly. And actually have gotten in my workout rather than commuting. Right. And so I think that's going to be a struggle for a little bit until things settle down for sure. Some companies are definitely realizing the power of remote, and it helps them. They're saving money. There's more productivity. They have more access.
Get workforce from around the world.
That's what I was just going to say. They have access to workforce around the world. They're not stuck just with people who can drive in. So there's so many positives. It's another thing with the economy going down. They're able to offer remote work as a benefit instead of giving people promotions or raises. So it's like another perk that doesn't cost them anything. So there's a lot of positive here, but we're in the middle. We're in the messy middle. We're in the tension where we'll have to see, right, who's going to give in first. Right, the employees who aren't going to go in.
And we thought it, who was it, Amazon, wasn't it, who said everybody's coming back in, and they all went, And and then they went, oh, okay, well, let's see how we can make this work. But and I don't know what's going on at Twitter. Who knows? I don't think they clearly don't know either. But
it is insane that the whole Twitter fiasco actually launched a new series for me. I'm doing a "You're Fired, Now What" series,
right?
Because it's insane, right?
Yeah, and I think. In some ways, a lot of this, I hate to say this, but I think some of it is generational. I mean, I'm at the very end of the baby boomers, which, a baby boomer got a job, had the same job, and retired, right? That was.
And then, wait, let's add in the pension and the fancy watch at the end.
Oh yeah, and which was like gold plated and turned your arm green. And so, and then, the generation, so then we raised this group to not do that. And it's really funny because I love it when people fuss and say, oh, we don't like millennials. I'm like, I'm sorry, but you raised them. But we raised them to expect more, and I think that's the thing. And then, we've got the Z's.
Now we got Gen Z,
writers that are there. We've run out of alphabet. I don't know what's happening.
What's going to happen after Gen Z?
I know. Can we go back to A? But they have such a totally different thought process. And part of it is they're not thinking, hey, I want to work for X number of years and get that pension and get that gold watch. I want to be able to take time off and enjoy time with friends and family, and not be so stressed, but and work remotely, and that I think is probably one of the biggest challenges, because the people in charge are still us old fogies who are like, no, you have to come into the office, I have to know what you're doing, and and everybody's like, nah.
Yeah, it's so interesting because now, young professionals, they're more interested in their experience versus, the old school ways. I'm going to build a resume. I'm going to, I'm going to climb the corporate ladder. And now people are like, what is going to be an experience? What's really going to add? And so maybe I'll work at a startup. Maybe I'll take a lateral position and, work abroad. Right. And so it's more about collecting experiences both at work and outside of work versus just building a very hierarchical type resume, So it's interesting. And this follows even what people like, right? The older generation collected things. We need the house, we need the picket fence, we need the nice car. We're competing with the Joneses. And this generation,
tiny homes,
right? Right. And this generation, yes, they've got the tiny homes, but they have the epic photo shoots in Bali.
Right. Right. And we're like, okay, I'll watch it on TV. Bali?
I'm not in Gen Z. I'm a elder millennial, but I'm definitely more about the experiences myself than the stuff.
And I think that comes back to what we were saying with, you need to experience life, and and I certainly discovered that when I was ill, because it was like, okay, is this what I'm doing? If I die tomorrow, is this really what I want to have?
What a wake up call.
Yeah, and so, it is, but yeah, we've got this whole group, which is now bigger, obviously, than anybody, that are saying, nah, this is different. We're going to work differently. And COVID, as you said, the pandemic just fast forwarded that by a whole bunch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, of course, there's good and there's bad, but I would say overall, I think it's for the positive, and even companies are starting to, put more emphasis on wellness, and on seeing their employees as humans. And, there's also more opportunities for gig work and freelance work, which allows people to have more flexibility.
Right.
So yeah, I think overall, right, more options, just I think it's overall good for everybody involved, right? Even though we're still figuring things out for sure. That'll probably be for a few years, but I think we will settle on our new normal fairly soon.
Yeah, and what I love is that there's still some traditional stuff that's in there. It was funny, we were talking before the program. One of the things that is, for me at least, and maybe this is my generation, LinkedIn. You've got to have, if you're in the job market, and I know you do a lot of LinkedIn training and working with people. You've got a giveaway on your website. It is still the way to be. And it's funny, I was contacted several months ago. I went to the University of Colorado, still very involved, even though we live in Atlanta. And one of the football coaches texted me. And my first thought was spam, right? And then I was, oh, wait, no, this really is, and he said that they had a recent graduate who, from their football program, who lived in Atlanta. And would I be willing to talk with him?
Oh, how much fun.
I know, and so he actually was a 6-year student, because COVID and redshirting, and, when you're an athlete, things sometimes work out. So he has 2 degrees, because he got one from Colorado, and then he got a master's degree from Tulane. Big dude, football player, all of those things. I love looking at his LinkedIn profile because it was his football headshot. I mean, all these things. But when I contacted him, what he tells me is, now he's 23 years old.
So he's a baby.
He said, I have got to make my LinkedIn profile the best it can be, because I have to build my network. And
so good. Smart.
Thinking, where did this come from? And it has been such a delight to work with him. And what I realized is he's not an anomaly. Now part of it was they were, obviously kind of taught that through their education, or through the football program. And he said, yeah, we had people who came in and worked with us on LinkedIn. I'm like, the football program? But yeah, his thing was, I've got to build my network. He said, yes, I still hope to play professional football. And he said, but at some point, and probably the pretty near future, I can't do that. And so it has been so much fun to work with him to see what, and his big thing is, what is he going to enjoy? But he also said, it was tricky because he had that whole expectation thing, right? He started playing football competitively. I don't know how you do this, when he was 4. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're the itty bitty little cat, and so there was always that expectation, and nobody ever really talked to him about, what do you want to do when you can't do that? And so it's been such a delight working with him, to kind of see him, you mentioned it before, peel back those layers of that onion. What is he gonna like? And it's just been so much fun working with this young man.
Yeah. And how beautiful that he's doing this work now.
I know.
I mean, I didn't really start, I followed the path that I learned, right?
You made the donuts,
Yep, I did all the things, right? And so it really took me until 30, my low 30s, to really start looking at things. And by the way, at 30, I thought it was too late. It's never too late. If you get nothing from this conversation today, it's never too late.
Change careers when you're my age, and we won't say what that is.
But that's what I was going to say. I work with people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and so many of them are just getting to the work now. And so, how lucky that this young man is doing this now, right? Versus waiting. And I do trust that all of our paths are exactly where we need to be at the time, that we are. But, that's a really special gift you're able to support him with.
Okay. And one of the things that he was talking about was he wants to, he's thinking about real estate. And so I've interviewed some people on the program. I connected him with several people, but now 23, he has told me, he said, what I want to do is I want to start a program like this, that I go into the colleges and I tell them, this is an option that you have. And he said, working with recent graduates. He said, because, they had people who came in, and I'm sure it's this way with especially in sports at the big schools. He said, they came in and they talked to us and they gave seminars. He said, but it's at 8, 9 o'clock at night. We've done everything that we have done throughout the day. He said, we started practice at 6 a.m. He said, 8 o'clock at night.
Toast.
Yeah.
And
he said, so, he wants to work with those kids right after they get out of college to say, okay, here's options that you have. And I mean, the fact that he was wanting to take on that mentor role was just so fun to see.
Yeah. It's beautiful. And so many of us end up in the jobs we're in because of our own experience, right? And because of something that we found missing. I mean, I wish I had the job joy plan when I was 30 and had a mental breakdown. What am I going to do with my life? And it's too late. I'm going to be stuck in finance forever. Where was I then?
Right. And one of the things, especially with remote, I think so many people are saying, this is what I'm going to do. I am going to do remote. And that is very different from 5 years ago, even though, we had people who said, I'm only going to work every other Friday in the office, all those things, this 100% remote, or at least the hybrid. How has that changed the job search?
So it's changed the job search in a lot of ways, looking for a remote job right now, while we're kind of in the messy middle, while companies are figuring it out, while employees are figuring it out, it's a different path. So some of the basics are the same, but getting a remote job, imagine if you're hiring someone who you don't have experience with. That is different than having worked with someone in an office. Then the pandemic happens and now you're working remote. You know them, their
you knew them,
their work products,
had coffee,
yes, all of those things. And so now companies are put in a position where if they're hiring remote, they're hiring people that they don't have that proof from yet, that they don't have the trust with yet. And so there are a lot of things that we need to do to build the trust along the way. So many remote jobs are not going to be on job boards. Now, there are job boards that are specific just to remote jobs, of course, but many of them aren't going to be put on job boards because they don't want the influx of 1 million people applying who shouldn't be applying at all. So there's going to be more emphasis. There is more emphasis on referrals. A lot of people are getting these remote jobs by starting with a contract role.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a test it out, make sure that it works.
Almost a temp job type of thing.
Yeah, like a temp to full-time job. And I know that can be frustrating as a job seeker when you just want to get your benefits and you want to have the guarantee of full time. But you have to remember, not only is it just part of the game and building trust, but you get to test out if you like working with them too, right? And so the path can be different in that way. You really have to show that you can handle the tech. So if you are getting on an interview for a remote job, and you don't know how to turn on your video, right? Or you didn't,
your camera's not set up right,
right?
Or ear, I'm not going to like that.
Exactly. Or if children are running around in the background, or you have to show that you're able to communicate well and easefully when you're remote. You have to, it's also important to show you have a dedicated workspace. When they see you at your kitchen table, they're going to be worried you're going to be distracted all day, right? It's important to, show that you're self-motivated and have proof of that. So have stories. Maybe in the pandemic, you did have to work remote. Maybe there was a period where you had a project and for whatever reason, you weren't in the office, but really proving that you're self-motivated, you're able to use the tech, you're able to communicate that way and collaborate that way and have examples, have stories of this. And really show up well on camera in your interviews, right? Because if you're, and it's not just communicating like verbally and can I get in touch with you and do I know how to use the tech, but can they feel you through the camera, right? And so many of us, we get on camera and we're like awkward and we're stiff. Exactly. Or we don't know how to share a screen, or when we do our job applications are up, right? We see all that. So that would be another thing. Also, it is more competition, to our point earlier, right? When companies are able to hire remote, they don't have to stick with one city. So there is going to be more competition. The flip side of that is, as a job seeker, you have more opportunity. You are not stuck with one area. So this is important in any job search, but especially if you're looking remote, right? You have to really think about, how am I going to stand out? How am I going to position myself? How am I going to connect in a way so that I don't blend in with all the other job seekers, right? Now, so those are just the changes.
And I love, I love that we do have these options. And of course, I say this as you and I are both in remote locations.
Yeah.
And which is just absolutely hilarious. I mean, I'm actually on a working vacation. And you are working remotely. We're about as far apart as you can get. We're on either coast.
We are.
And so, aside from, I never know what time it is in some of these places, but as long as you've got, and it's basic tech, right? It's, in some cases, it doesn't have to be all that complicated, but you have to show that you've got that grasp. But part of it too is, like you said, we can be in all these different places. I was talking with, I interviewed somebody for the podcast the other day in Australia, and I happened to say, what time was it? And he said midnight. I'm like, oh. And he said, no, most of my clients are in the US. And so I work nights, and that's,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, that gives you the flexibility as an employee or even a business owner, consultant, whatever you're doing, to be able to do that and say, I'm, as wherever I have internet access, right? That's pretty much the goal anymore.
All I need.
Yeah, we can do this. Now, is it a challenge? Yes. Trying to respond to emails on my phone doesn't always work. And so, if you're, that is again part of the challenge of the job. I mean, if you are, an employee or a consultant, whatever, and you do have difficulty doing that, you've got to change it really fast. I can tell my clients, hey, I'm working remotely this week, because they know next week it will be fixed. But if it was, I'm working remotely and you might get it or you might not, that's not going to work.
Yeah, of course it's not going to work. And you need to figure out what works with you. So maybe, you don't, there's certain things that I don't do on my phone, even though technically I could. And that's because it's annoying. It's tedious. I don't like looking at the small screen. And so I just hold off till I have my laptop in front of me. And I will say, I was trained, I was thinking about this the other day, being a consultant where all you have is your laptop and you're working in airports and you're working in a busy conference room. I feel like that was training for me for remote work, because I don't need like a big screen. I don't need like the big mainframe computer. And I think I'm lucky in that way, because from the beginning, before it was a thing, I was essentially working remote because I was traveling every week to go to the client site, right? And how much work I got done on the plane, right? Before Wi-Fi.
Disturbed. That's always.
But you could not be disturbed. That was so good. Not anymore.
I don't know. But yeah, it is, making that investment, whether you're the employee, whether you're the business owner, just to make sure you've got, the little basics.
And practicing beforehand, right? Like if you always use Zoom and you're going to be interviewed on Teams, download Teams, practice with someone. Doing a tech check the day before, letting your computer do its updates so it doesn't in the middle of your interview decide it's going to shut down.
That's always fun, right?
Yeah, and then always having a backup plan, because stuff happens, right? The first time you and I tried to tape this,
this is take two.
This is take two. But being able to be flexible there, and if we had a meeting where it was very time sensitive, we could have gotten on the phone, or we could have, tried another app. So that's another thing, back to like the things you need to show that you're able to handle as a remote worker, that you are able to be flexible, that you're not going to have a meltdown because, Zoom is broken or because the Wi-Fi is there, right? If you have a Wi-Fi issue, you get on phone data, right? These are all things that we can fix and we can get ahead of, and we're all learning.
Right.
right?
And yes, it is a little bit more difficult for some people, for whatever reason. And, age is one of those issues, but if we can, I tell people my mom is 90 and she is on Facebook every day,
Oh,
you know, and so, anybody who tells me, oh, I'm too old. No,
well,
there's
it's just you're not interested in learning. And if you're not interested in learning, just admit that. And then find a job where you don't need to learn that. This also comes back to like just being really honest with ourselves, and there's no judgment. If my parents are retired, but I know, towards the end, my dad was like, I don't like Zoom. That's okay. If from my perspective, of course, I'm on Zoom all day. I'm like, this is easy. And the opportunities, and you could consult and all this. But if he doesn't like Zoom, if he's not willing to learn, if he's not interested, there's nothing wrong with that. You just focus on opportunities where it is a fit. And this comes back to alignment in so many ways.
Right. And it is, as you said, it's about being honest with yourself and saying, okay, I know I'm going to have to do a Zoom meeting every morning with my boss for 15 minutes. I got to get used to that.
Yeah.
And so then you have, a background or whatever, and that has obviously evolved. I love the backgrounds of things. But we've also gotten more tolerant, right? That if the cat goes wandering through, the cat goes wandering through. I did a podcast, a while ago, and it was funny because I could see that my guest, he's looking off,
Oh no.
and you could see something is happening. But, because he was, and about that point, over top of the computer came a cat.
It's kind of fun when that happens, by the way.
Catzilla that just came over. And then he was like, I didn't know he said, because if I went to hit him, he was going to knock the computer over. And we just thought that was the funniest thing in the world. I had a guest at the start of the pandemic that he was at his kitchen table. He did not have a space that was dedicated. And so, I'm interviewing him and we're having a great time. And his kitchen is right behind him. And very quietly, his teenage son comes bebopping in, makes his sandwich, it goes and goes.
That is so cute.
And could we have stopped? Sure. But,
these things, I actually see them as humanizing people.
Yeah.
We are not human doers. We are human beings. We all have, lives outside. And I actually, on one hand, yes, it's important, especially if you're interviewing, to show your professional.
If you're interviewing for a job, that's very different.
But at the same time, right, we are humans with different lives. I will say your example was very PG. It's reminding me of one that's making the rounds on Instagram. Have you seen this one? She's like on the news.
I've seen some people in bathrobes.
And her husband goes by and he's naked. And she pauses and there's like nothing she could do. And then he walks out of scream. And this is on TV, right? It's too late. Tell your people, no walking around naked.
No.
Leave up a sign.
And I mean, and that's the thing is, when I'm recording, when I'm home recording, I have a sign that goes out. So, it actually says on the air, like, if we were in a real radio station. And so you set those expectations to the kids, to, whoever, unless you are bleeding, you don't knock, and there are other things, somebody was telling me the other day, they were talking with this person and they're very professional, and it was one of these, and their background was very professional. And for some reason they stood up and they were naked.
Oh no.
We all laughed that, we wear shorts now when we're doing all of these, and we were like, okay. And so I tell people, wear pants. You never know when you might have to get up.
Yes.
But you're right. It does humanize us. And I think that's part of this, is because we're not able to see people where you can touch them. We're face to face, but if you can't, be somewhere where you can truly reach out to them, these things help make us human. And so you see, the pictures in the background of, the kids' soccer or whatever it is. And it just lets us connect on those levels that we need to connect on to really work together.
Yeah, I like that part. That's a nice change.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love it. Well, oh my gosh, Kristen, we've only got about 5 minutes left. And this has been so much fun. And it's going to be something that's ongoing. So I think we need to have you on again. But we
Absolutely.
didn't talk about your book. I didn't have the opportunity to read it. And then you have great services that you provide, both for job seekers and for entrepreneurs. So tell us a little bit more about all of that.
Yeah. So JobJoy, you can find wherever you buy books. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, all the places. And that is like it's a shorter book. It's a manual for, really career happiness. If you are, looking to change jobs, if you're looking to step up in your leadership at work, I have a program called Find Your Job Joy, and it's a comprehensive program, how to be happier now, how to figure out what you want, how to position yourself and all the job search fundamentals, then also getting off on the right foot. So that would be kind of the corporate track. And then I have Job Joy for entrepreneurs. And that is, I help all entrepreneurs, but specifically those with corporate backgrounds.
Okay.
So many of us who have grown up in corporate, we're launching our own side hustles, launching our own
And we're
business.
like, no.
Yes, it's another positive effect of, the past few years. And yet at the same time, the reason I love to work with people who have that corporate background who are launching businesses is we have a lot of specific bad habits we need to break about the ways we were taught to do things in corporate that are no longer going to work.
Stop making my copies for me.
Right? And just, even the way we see work, because what happens is if we're not careful, we, leave our corporate jobs to have this life of freedom, to have our own business, to make more of an impact. And then we end up, if we're not careful, unconsciously recreating that same environment that we were trying to leave.
Yeah, we're retired of the hours we were working. And then we do the same thing.
That was the example I was going to give. Like, I've always been a hard worker. It's always been something I prided myself on. But when I started my own business, I found myself, even on one hand, keeping hours that were kind of corporate hours. I don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
Or, working more hours than perhaps is healthy. And it's like, where did this come from? Why am I feeling guilty for taking a lunch break? And it's like, how good is my boss being to me?
Right.
Right. Which is me.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot also that, are strengths from corporate that will help us succeed. And so it's a special path, that I think is a little bit different than just there's a million business coaches out there. Right? So those are kind of the tracks. You can go to findyourjobjoy.com. As you mentioned, on my website, I have a free LinkedIn tips training, which will, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're a job seeker, it will bring you through all the aspects of LinkedIn to really position yourself in a way to attract perfect for you opportunities or clients. And, the beauty of LinkedIn is that using the format they use, or that they provide for you, it forces you to go through this mental exercise of figuring out, who am I? What do I offer? How can I position myself? And then everything you learn in that training to position yourself on LinkedIn, you can leverage that everywhere else in your in-person conversations, if you're anywhere else on social media, on your website. So it's a really helpful free training. If you're interested, go check it out.
I love it. I love it. And the one thing that you mentioned that we just went briefly over is you might like where you are, but you want something different with that company, and so you help people with that too. And I love that, because I think that happens a lot of times, and people are like, I like working here. I like the people. I like all of those things, but I want to be doing this. And instead. And so how can you position yourself to get that promotion, to change that role? Sometimes that's what happens is, it's a totally different role.
Yeah. And it could be redefining your current role. It could be, changing to another department, but I'm not the quit your job coach. I'm the, build a career that is aligned with you, that supports your life coach. And so sometimes that does mean, working within the current system where you already have the goodwill, you already have the reputation, you already have the flexibility that in a new
benefits that come with being there for a long time.
You have the benefits, people know you. And so there's a lot more that you can kind of get away with, so to speak. Which can be really helpful when you're, when you're redefining your current job at your current company.
Right. I love it. I love it. Well, Kristen, as I said, we need to do this again, because we are still evolving. We're going to have to figure out what this new work environment is. And And it's not that the key is it's not going to switch to something. It's just going to continually be evolving. And I think that's the challenge, fun challenge in doing all of this. And so we will definitely have you on again. But until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
I mean, the world is on fire now. I keep waiting. Maybe next year will be calmer. When are we going to have like a peaceful period, right? And it can be easy to use that and all just the stress and the news and the economy as an excuse or as a reason to say, I'll hold off or now's not the right time. But I really want to invite people to see that now more than ever, we need more on purpose people. And so I just want to encourage you to go after what's in your heart. Don't wait, because the world isn't calming down anytime soon. And we need people who are in their gifts, because it's not just the impact you're making in your work, but it's the ripple effect with everyone you touch.
I love it. I love it. Well, I have been having so much fun.
Me
Second
too.
try, talking with Kristen Zavo from Job Joy. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.